Oh, what's going on, GameLeap? This is the Jizz, and in today's video, we are going to be giving you 20 challenger tips to help you to become a ZED master. So these 20 tips, they might include combos, they might include general mechanics, or just a bit of must-know knowledge for ZED that you can take into your games instantly and apply them. So by the end of today's video, you should have all the necessary mechanics and knowledge to go out and completely dominate on the Master of Shadows. And if this video isn't enough, make sure you check out the GameLeap website in the description and comment section so you can get access to even more ZED videos and all the champions in this game. We have learning resources for every single one in terms of guides, courses, VOD analyses from the best players in the world to help you become one of them. So make sure you check out those links down below, and let's get into the video. Now, the first tip is all about playstyle, and it could be the most important tip in this video. So you have to think of ZED as an AD spellcaster. So for most of the game, you are going to be casting your abilities from a distance and only going in and auto-attacking when you have serious kill threat. So the best ZED players will actually play at range and be almost untouchable until that time comes to go for the head. So if you are new to ZED, it's essential to understand that putting yourself into close contact with your opponent is generally a bad thing. Now, tip number 2, during the laning phase, you really want to be using your Q to last hit against stronger early game champions, because walking up and last hitting minions, the enemy champion is most likely, or they should be, pressuring you for this. And because you're generally a weak early game champion, we don't want to lose that much HP. We want to hit level 3, which is our first real power spike, as healthy as possible, so the power spike is actually a power spike, just that. So using your Q to last hit minions is a great tactic. It means obviously you're going to get the gold, but you're also going to preserve your HP. Now, tip number 3, when you don't have to last hit minions, you can use your Q to poke your opponent, especially when they go for a CS or just run straight at you or cast one of their abilities, because getting chip damage like this is really important on ZED. The lower the enemy champion is, the closer they're going to be to death, because when you do hit level 3, you will just have more kill potential, so always look out for the Q poke when you don't have to last hit minions. Now, tip number 4, one nasty little surprise combo that you can pull out of the bag when the opponent is generally below half HP, because this will proc your passive, so that auto attack you throw in there will deal more damage to a target with less than half HP, is the Q flash auto combo. So the advantage of doing this rather than flashing before queuing is the fact that it's just harder to react to. The enemy champion probably just won't expect it, and this gives you a massive amount of kill threat if you can whittle down your opponent's HP bar with your Q poke. Now, tip number 5, the game starts getting more dynamic and red hot once you get your W living shadow, and how you use this is crucial to becoming a master of ZED. And the standard combo is of course the WEQ combo, which I'm sure all of us have in our arsenal. But there are a couple of very important details that you have to know about to execute this properly all the time. So tip number 5 in this video is, during this WEQ combo, place your shadow to the side of your opponent before you E. Lots of inexperienced ZED players will W on top of their enemy, and this just makes it really awkward to land your shurikens. Whereas if you shadow to one side of the enemy champion, it becomes so much easier because it forces them in the other direction. So if you place your shadow to the right of your opponent, you force them left, so you Q to the left. If you place your shadow to the left of your opponent, vice versa, right? You force them right, so you then Q to the right. But just another tip here, because you really want to use as many of these combos as possible. So tip number 6, before you hit level 3, which is on that first cannon wave or the third minion wave, do not use your Q or E. That's if you have both skilled, because you want to have all the energy you can to pull off this combo, and of course you want your spells too. I've coached that many ZED players who will use their Q right before they hit this big power spike, and as a result, it's not really a deadly power spike because you don't have one of your key spells, and the enemy champion will have plenty of time afterwards to react to your level up. You want to catch them by surprise, so do not waste cooldowns right before you hit level 3. Now, tip number 7 is also related to this WEQ combo, and it's something ZED99 and the best ZED players do on a regular basis. They walk up to the enemy champion before queuing. So after you W and E, lots of players will just queue straight away, which works for sure, but most of the time you do this, you'll be pretty far away from your opponent, and the shuriken you throw out can be dodged. So to reduce the chances your opponent dodging both Qs from your shadow and ZED himself, run towards your enemy, and when they stop juking or stop to cast one of their own spells, that's when you press Q, and you will increase your chances of landing as much damage as possible. Now, tip number 8 relates to the other variation of this combo, and this is the WQE combo. So instead of Eing first, you're using your Q, and this combo is actually the quicker out of the two. So the question is, when do I use the WQE combo and not the WEQ combo? Well, the advantage of the WEQ combo is that your E will slow your opponent, giving you a great chance to land your shurikens, but sometimes the enemy champion won't need to be slowed because they will be busy completing an action themselves. So this might be last hitting or casting an ability, or maybe your jungler has ganked and has CC'd your opponent. The slow in these situations becomes irrelevant. All that matters is getting in the quickest, biggest damage combo, and that's when you WQE. Now, tip number 9 is actually just a combo, and to be honest, honest, this is my personal favorite because very few Zed players actually use it, but it shows that you know your stuff. So I said at the start of this video in tip number 1 that you rarely want to be headbutting your opponent because Zed is more of an AD spellcaster. Now this is true, but sometimes when your opponent jumps on your head, you have no choice. So the backwards combo is what you want, and this starts with you placing your W behind you, not in front of you, and you are simply doing a QE combo because it's faster and auto attacking while you're Eing as well. And then you are pressing W again so you escape the enemy's clutches. 95% of the time both shurikens will land and you will proc electrocute and completely catch your enemy by surprise. Now you can also do this if the enemy mid laner is farming under their tower because you can place your W outside of their tower's range and you won't take any aggro. But why would you use this combo and not one of the standard W combos? Well, this one has more damage in it because you are auto attacking your opponent before using your spells. Now tip number 10, this is going to stop you from dying during the laning phase. So on Zed, your abilities are close to everything. They are huge. So when you don't have your cooldowns and you are out of energy, you might as well be a caster minion. So tip number 10 is quite simply, play safe until you replenish your cooldowns and your energy. The laning phase really revolves around your W's cooldown and then the accuracy you have with landing those W combos. Now also keep in mind that your only form of escape is your W. So if you are using that offensively, you are giving up all of your defense, so your positioning is paramount to not inting. So generally speaking, this means staying out of range of your opponent's abilities and positioning away from the side the enemy jungler is on. Now tip number 11, listen to this one. You want to seduce your opponent with your W. Now it might sound a bit weird, a bit of seduction on the rift, but that's what the jizz is about. So what I mean is this, after you use your WEQ or WQE combo, your shadow is sitting there in close proximity to the enemy champion. So what we can do is lull our opponent into a false sense of security by backing off, and if we do actually have kill pressure, so our E might come back off cooldown, we can press W again to return to the shadow and then execute our opponent. This is a very cheeky trick that you have to use, and even the best players in the world can fall for this level of seduction. Now another mechanic you have to practice and perfect is coming in at number 12. So whenever you blink to your W shadow to kill your opponent, sometimes they still might be out of auto attack range. Not everyone is that stupid to just stand next to your shadow. So this is where the flash E auto attack mechanic comes into play. So after chunking your enemy with a W combo, you are closing that gap they have created to your shadow by flashing, then Eing, and while you are Eing, you are right clicking on your opponent so your auto attack goes through immediately. And if you have to, use your ignite and enemy goes boom. Now tip number 13 is a nice easy one, and it's really just about Zed knowledge rather than how you are actually comboing and using your spells. So your E, Shadow Slash, this does not interrupt your auto attacks. So it doesn't matter if you auto attack and then E or E and then auto attack, it's exactly the same result, and even if you use it while you're auto attacking, the auto attack will still go through. Now tip number 14 is kind of advanced because let me put it this way, your average Joe Zed main certainly does not do this, but it is a great weapon to have in your arsenal. So most players are going to W and then use their E. Now there might only be a couple of milliseconds between you pressing W and then your E, but this can actually be quicker. So what you can do is press W and E at exactly the same time, and it will look as if you are throwing out your E before you actually cast your W. So not only is it a quicker way to W and E, but because of this, it means that you can throw your Qs out quicker and the enemy has less time to react. Now it does take some practice to get that muscle memory completely foolproof, so get into that practice tool and practice away. Now let's spice things up and give you some tips about Zed's ultimate and the sick combos you can pull off of your death mark. Now tip number 15 relates to the combo that you will probably use most of the time. So during the laning phase, when you chunk your opponent with one of your standard W combos, you all of a sudden realize, holy cow, I can actually kill this dude. So you press W and then you are instantly. But there are two things that can go wrong here. So number one, you won't have your E or Q because you just used it. So after you ult, the only damage you are dealing and putting into your death mark is through your auto attacks, which might be enough, but it's much more reliable if you can time your ultimate when your spells are 1 to 2 seconds away from coming off cooldown. So tip 15A, if you like, is just to wait a tiny bit before ulting in immediately. Now the other side of tip 15, tip 15B, is that when you press your R, you have to understand that you will always end up behind your opponent and you cannot R back to your original location for half a second, which believe it or not is actually a long time. So this really becomes a problem when your opponent has their cooldowns ready to use. For example, if you jump onto a Cassiopeia when she has her W ready, you will be grounded as soon as you come out of your ultimate animation and you will be the one trying to not die. So tip 15B, keep track of your opponent's key cooldowns before you ult. Now I did just say that you will always end up behind your opponent when you death mark, which is correct, but there are two ways you can cheat the system, and these two tricks comprise tip number 16. So the first is to place your W on your side of your opponent before pressing R. What this allows you to do is press W as soon as you come out of your ult animation, and look at that, it's like you didn't even press R in the first place. This means that that enemy Xerath you were playing against who threw his E out behind him misses it. It means that Cassiopeia who threw her miasma behind defender misses this too, so this keeps you mobile and out of danger. And the other way is to simply flash. No rocket science with this one, just press R and then you'll flash key immediately after. Now speaking of that WR trick we just looked at, that's going to be the next tip, and it's probably my favorite ultimate combo on Zed because it looks the flashiest and you will definitely impress your ego watching. Now this will take some practice, so don't smash anything if you don't do it the first time. So when your opponent is in W and E range of you, this is what you want to do first, but you want to place your W in front of your opponent, not to the side or behind them, in front of them or towards you. This means that when you press R, we can immediately press W to avoid the enemy's abilities, and while pressing R, we are also pressing Q with our cursor on top of the enemy champion. And in terms of raw damage, this will do a heck of a lot because you are landing 3 shurikens, one from your ultimate shadow, one from behind the enemy champion, and from your W shadow. If you can land all 3, and trust me, because you are so close to the enemy champion, it's a lot easier than you think. They are 100% dead. Now tip number 18 is another variation of this WR mechanic, and instead of using your W with your E to slow your opponent, you are going to use your W as an escape route. So this is an excellent trick you can use when you want to tower dive, for example. So as soon as you get in ultimate range of your opponent, throw your W behind you in a safe position. Then as you press R, you are going to press W, E and Q all at the same time while your cursor is on top of the enemy's head. And not only do you have the damage from your E in this version's death mark, you are untouchable in the process. Now of course you don't just have to do this when you are tower diving. You can use this to stay out of vision of your opponent. So you can place your W over a wall, press R and do the same thing, and they can't even see you, let alone damage you. Now tip number 19 is the deadliest of all the deathmark combos, and you should always be using this when your opponent does not have an ability that can stop you when you appear behind them after ulting. So you can pretty much use this on every AD carry, on a Lux without her Q, on a Syndra with no E, you get the drift. So you simply walk up to your opponent and press R, and you are going to wait when you come out of it. Now this achieves 2 things, might sound a little weird, but first of all you get right on top of your opponent, and second, you don't draw tower aggro. So what you're essentially doing is buying yourself time to wait for the perfect opportunity to then W, E, Q, and you can auto attack as well, and then R back to your original location. This results in the maximum amount of damage from your ultimate, but do be careful using this combo once again if the enemy champion has an ability that can cuck you. Now tip number 20, last but definitely not least, is a visual sign that anyone who has ever played Zed knows about. So what do you guys think this could be? And just before we reveal this last tip, if you do enjoy this type of champion guide where the Jizz gives you a bunch of useful and applicable tips to use straight away in your games, let us know by leaving a like down below. So the visual cue, tip number 20, is the spinning shuriken. So whenever you deal enough damage with your ultimate to kill your opponent, above their head will appear a spinning shuriken, the death mark, which means that when your ultimate damage detonates, that champion is going to go splat. So if you ever see this after you use your ultimate, you don't have to beat a dead horse. They are already dead. Escape the scene of the crime so you don't take any damage instead. And those were the 20 challenger tips to master to become a Zed main. And as always, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future season 12 uploads. And until tomorrow's daily upload, this has been a chill.